Чтобы соблюдать точное время, я буду говорить по-английски, потому что я подготовил резюме на английском, но потом попробую ответить, если есть вопросы, и на русском, и на английском. Within the broad framework of the modern era, and more specifically in the era of 20th century and the Cold War, various accents and key factors for historical analysis can be placed, as this not only the closest but also the most massive era of demographic boom and global connectivity of people. Processes, communications and outcomes are incomparably massive, often universally valid for all in the region, continent or the world. One of such traits which plays the role of litmus test in the context of Bulgarian-Serbian relations is the question of land, territorial development and architecture. Land or territory is the oldest measure of power, authority and rivalry. From prehistoric times to the modern era, especially after the second and third industrial revolutions, societies, states and their alliances dispute, wage wars, negotiate, lose or conquer lands. The modern era, communication development and the possibility to dominate technologically, innovatively, make territorial disputes secondary, while technological becomes of primary importance. In that way, we can understand why at one period after the Second World War, and especially after the rupture between Tito and Stalin, relations between Yugoslavia and the Eastern Bloc not only worsened, but practically froze. In the specific case of Bulgarian-Yugoslav relations, this is even more pronounced due to the change in Bulgarian policy since the early 60s regarding the so-called Macedonian question, which in the late 40s had an international compromise solution by Georgi Dimitrov regarding the idea of Balkan Federation and the talks surrounding the Bled Agreement. After the complete abandonment of that idea, as well as the emancipation of SFRU from Moscow and its allies, the new Bulgarian leadership embarked on a path of strict and narrow defense of its state and national interests in all its external fronts, including not only Greece and Turkey, but also Yugoslavia. The Macedonian question and the rejection of Dimitrov's position by the new leader Zhivkov became a major obstacle to the development of deeper and closer relations almost until the end of the 80s. However, the modern era and the strongly dominating socialist and Marxist ideology of technological and social progress allow of the People Republic of Bulgaria and SFRU to develop relations on foreign ground in the field of technology export, modernization and development among countries in the Middle East, Africa, Asia and Latin America. In this context, beyond the official state level between Sofia and Belgrade, among developing countries or those struggling for decolonization and independence, Bulgarian and Serbian teams will participate simultaneously in the material and technological construction or marking the new states that reject the power of the old colonial centers in London, Paris, Lisbon, Amsterdam, Madrid, Brussels, etc. A specific example of such parallel, but within the same ideological and political framework action of the Bulgarian and Serbian scene, is the construction of the Nigerian capital Lagos in the first and independent decade of the 1970s. Why it is claimed to be parallel, but not pre-synchronized, but essentially and practically joined. The People Republic of Bulgaria is undoubtedly the most active trading and undertaking foreign trade, scientific, technical and exchange initiatives with a third-party ally of the USSR in the Eastern Europe. The reasons for this activity themselves represent an extensive and very important topic, partially researched. This position of Bulgaria locally, with the framework of the Socialist International, openness and the possibility of creating its own network of trade, scientific and cultural partnerships beyond the socialist camp, is the most active in the direction of the so-called revolutionary, anti-colonial, secular regimes, which began to establish themselves after the elimination of colonial structures in the 50s and the 60s, in the Middle East and Africa mainly. These contacts and technological or cultural initiatives are laid in the direction of a class assistance to countries that, although not yet socialist, are striving primarily for political and anti-imperialist emancipation. So they develop friendly relations with the USSR, the socialist camps and their allies. The Yugoslav case of African activity has a similar basis that refers to the anti-imperialism, class struggle and fair and independent distribution of the state resources to each country. However, Belgrade managed to expand this basis with the additional idea and then political construction of the common socialist framework. This framework goes beyond the socialist capitalist opposition during the Cold War, where the SFRU distanced itself from Moscow ideologically and spiritually and inhabited the anti-colonial space. This additional framework, it's very well known, it's called the Non-Aligned Movement, which has been held in 1961 in Belgrade. I'm summarizing. To summarize the political aspect of Bulgarian-Serbian in the context of Bulgarian Yugoslav relations in Africa, during decolonization and the Cold War, one must draw the conclusion that the idea of socialist and, in the African context, anti-colonial solidarity of struggling people makes Bulgarian and Serbian groups part of the same process, in the same place, and the same time, with the same ideological goals and tasks. This is the post-colonial construction of Africa and the modernization aid for newly emancipated countries. In the case of Nigeria, we have the British colony of Nigeria in the beginning of 20th century. After the Second World War, there is a possibility and initiative for independent constitution. On October 1st, 1960, Nigeria became an independent country. Exactly 3 years later, in 1st of October 1963, there was the first coup d'etat. After 15th of January 1917, after 5 years of civil war, there were already diplomatic relations between Bulgaria and Nigeria and Yugoslavia and Nigeria. What is the Bulgarian contribution to the cultural infrastructure of Nigeria? The Bulgarian Development Assistant, I don't know, okay. The Bulgarian Development Assistance Program for decolonized countries in the specific case of Nigeria began in 1972, just 2 years after the diplomatic relations, with a visit by Nigerian specialists to Sofia. The goal was to attract the team of the renowned Bulgarian architect Stefan Kočev, who designed the Palace of Sports in the Bulgarian seaside capital of Varna. He was known for his innovative approach to design and construction. Kočev worked in various areas of architecture, including public buildings, cultural centers, and residential complexes. He was very well known for his carefully crafted vision. An agreement which reached regarding the second World Festival of African Arts, which was the biggest cultural initiative in Africa in the 70s, which took place in Lagos, was constructed by this Bulgarian team and funded by the Bulgarian state. In the same time, Yugoslav contribution to economic infrastructure was initiated in 1973. And the Nigerian Federal Ministry of Construction initiated a competition for the construction of a new fairground. At the time, the urban development project for 7 cities in Kano state, one of the states in Nigeria, was in its final stage, and the renowned Serbian architect from Yugoslavia, Zoran Bojovic, was called upon to move from Kano to Lagos to see if it's possible to participate in the competition. And despite having only 2 weeks, he developed such a detailed project, and his proposal won the international competition. Bulgarian Yugoslav activity in the corporate form. Technoexportstroj is the company is Bulgarian company founded in 1967 for initiatives like this. While Energoprojekt is the Yugoslav alter ego of the same, established in 1951. The history of the two countries' foreign trade relations and initiatives during the Cold War period is significantly different. They have different origins, conditions, or possibility, structure, and results. But in the case of activity in Africa, the parallels are extremely significant. Both companies aim to engage expert teams respectively from People's Republic of Bulgaria and the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in work abroad. This commitment is outlined in 2 main directions. First of all, export of expert potential, aimed to supporting the construction of the post-colonial and respectively anti-imperialist countries in the so-called Third World. This is the common ideological political basis that blinds all the socialist countries with those that, in the second half of 20th century, gradually began their formal emancipation from their colonial metropolis, mainly in the regions of Middle East and Africa. Latin America and its left-wing governments, which cooperate at various levels in the degrees of involvement with the Soviet bloc and SFRU, or other communist countries, represent another phenomena related not so much to the separation from the Spanish colonial center, but to the proximity and influence of the United States. This is the first base. The second base is the second common characteristic, in addition to the ideological basis, is related to the network of the so-called foreign trained companies, which both SFRU, due its specificity of openness, a minute and a half, and the People's Republic of Bulgaria after 1962, began to build. In other words, the socialist aid provided to anti-imperialist countries in the Middle East and Africa is channeled into market form. These market trade relations essentially allow and strengthen the socialist economies themselves by accessing new markets and partially seizing them from old British, French, or other corporate structures. Conclusion: Bulgarian-Serbian relations have their centuries-old history, but in the midst of the Cold War and dramatic 20th century, which posed a number of difficulties in bilateral relations, it is important, in view of a full understanding of these relations, to analyze other cases of synchronous Bulgarian, Nigerian, or Yugoslav-Nigerian cooperations in the 70s, regarding the construction of 2 of the most important objects for the newly proclaimed independence of Nigeria, namely the Palace of Culture and Sports, which hosted one of the forums for cultural identity of New Nigeria. So this is the cultural infrastructure helped by Bulgaria, and the International Fair in Lagos, which is a symbolic but also actively operating up to today like the economic and trade infrastructure. The People Republic of Bulgaria and Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia cooperate not only at official meetings and political channels, but also on a third stage, where a bilateral dialogue is actually carried out on a professional, technical, and ideological political level on the processes of decolonization. On the other hand, these relations between Bulgarian and Serbian missions can be viewed in another context, not only through the prism of ideological proximity, but also through the market competition between Technoexportstroj and Energoprojekt in that case. Regardless of the point of view, this is an important element for understanding the dynamics and the various phenomena of random or planned meetings, exchanges, and actions in the context of the bilateral relations. Thank you very much.